Explain to me, Sylvia, why are you running?
Well, I'm running to continue the work that we began in the last term. So primarily running to protect American values, parental rights, and childhood innocence, those kinds of things.
Okay. I mean, you pretty much kind of answered this in that kind of answer, but I'll still ask it.
Yeah.
What are your priorities?
What are my priorities?
Yeah.
Really to continue to protect against government overreach. It's very important to me that the county continues to operate in a constitutional manner, that freedoms are protected. I do very much care about parental rights, and childhood innocence is very important to me. Those were some of the factors that first brought county government to my attention, was how they were overstepping in those areas. So continue to be concerned about that. But beyond that, I really love county government. I love how close to the people that it is. And so I've enjoyed the work, and I think there's a lot to be done in the area of community mental health. So continue to be excited for some changes and for some growth that's possible there. So those are probably the primary things.
Tell me about you personally. What things you like to do, places you like to go. Tell me about you personally.
Okay,
Maybe
well.
something that people might not know about. Just share.
Okay, so some of my background, because at this point I'm very busy with my work, whether it's Ottawa Impact or as a county commissioner. But in my past, I was a social worker out of college, so I worked in foster care and adoption, and a lot of that work has come back to be quite valuable to this role. And then, kind of for personal enjoyment, I was an artist, and so did that as a hobby in high school, but also pursued it kind of part-time as I was starting out my social work career. I did that for a little bit after college too. So that's something I do when I have excessive amounts of time, which I don't have a lot of. But so that's an interest. And then I also was a child photographer for about 10 years, and I did photography mostly of children and families, and also some design products for photographers. So I guess I kind of have an artistic bent, so I did those things before I got involved in politics.
Why should people vote for you?
Because I care very much about the people, and coming from a social work background, it's really in my DNA to be an advocate for people. When I see people who are in need, for instance, when I saw the needs in regards to our veterans, I very much want to go to bat for people. And so I enjoy that. I enjoy seeing needs and figuring out how we can meet them.
This is the kind of the question I kind of like changed up for the incumbents. So explain to me, over the past year and a half to 2 years, what are some successes that you think you've had, failures, and or like things you would have liked to have changed?
Okay. So, okay, that's kind of a tough one, or complex.
You can break it up a bit, so don't worry.
So some successes are, like I just mentioned, I really enjoyed the work that we did to get the Veterans Department up and going. I wasn't aware coming into office like how deficient that area was, and so so that was, to me, a big success. I really have enjoyed the resolutions that we've done. I think it's important for the county to set a vision for the people, and so I've appreciated being able to be a part of that. I've done a lot of the writing for those, and so so I've personally enjoyed the experience of doing that. So for me, that's been significant. I think we did some good work with the budget, really looking at things. So I guess that has been a challenge. And I think that's a challenge overall in the county, and maybe that's been a lack of understanding in how government works in general. And also, I think things haven't always been run well in the past. I think that, so I might be deviating a little bit here, but I think that in the past, oftentimes things were proposed by administration, and then just, everybody went along with it. A lot of the votes were 11-0, most of them were. And so when we came into office, we wanted to be very serious and careful about every decision that we made. And so we have taken process very seriously. And so when we do things like work on a budget, we're truly choosing to provide oversight and to look into things carefully and deeply. And I think that's not a process that, or a methodology that has been used in the past. And so some of our departments haven't understood that, and they perhaps have taken that, personally, or, they just haven't understood what's going on. And oftentimes, that's when we've seen things hit the news, as chaotic, and, people jump to conclusions, when we're, in fact, at the beginning of a process that we're about to walk through to come to good, careful decisions. And sometimes we're a full month, 2 months out from the end of that process, and from final decisions. And so that's something I've learned coming into this position, is just the importance of process and the importance of patience in letting process work itself out. But I think it's also something that a lot of our people don't understand, or maybe are just beginning to understand, that process is important. And definitely it's been, I think, a lesson to the bureaucracy of the county that things are going to take time and thought and consideration. And leadership isn't just going to do things because, a department tells us to. So, that's been a big learning experience for me.
Now, to kind of do some follow-up questions to some answers that you provided, you mentioned that you have crafted resolutions. Have you crafted all of them, or have you crafted some? If so,
I've crafted most of them.
Okay.
There have been, a couple that other people have worked on or done the bulk of the work for, but I've done most of them.
Tell me a little bit about the childhood innocence resolution. How have you seen that shape up since you passed it versus how it has been applied here to county government, Ottawa County government?
So I would say that that's one that I hope will be longstanding, and it's one that I think we'll continue to see how it plays out. And so what I mean by that is, I think it was a really important resolution to do, to communicate to our departments and our employees what we expect as far as leadership and what we're going to do as a county. I don't think the follow-through has necessarily been great from some of the departments. And so I think we have continued work to do there. It's an issue in general in our culture. And so I think we're just going to have to continue to talk about it and work through it. And most of our authority is with the budget. And so if things are happening, that we are asking to not have happen, then we may have to take a look when it comes to the budget about, okay, well, what are we going to do because this hasn't been taken seriously? So, specifically how that will play itself out, I can't say, but, we'll continue to look at it.
Talk to me about the Veterans Department. I know that was one that you definitely were very much adamant on getting passed. How have you found it successful, or how have you found it to where it could still keep on building on?
So I think it's still in its baby stages. So I think they've done a good assessment of figuring out, what some of the needs are and where they can go with it. I know I was very concerned in my initial conversations with the prior leadership that there was very minimal outreach going out.
Prior leadership being the Veterans Department? Or
the Veterans Department, yeah.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, there was very little outreach to veterans happening, and part of it was because they were concerned they'd be overwhelmed if more veterans found out about them and then needed help because they didn't have the capacity to help them. And so I think that has, just the initial, and even just the conversations about building a veterans department has increased awareness that we are even here and that we can serve our veterans. I think they're continuing to build up the staffing and the services that they can do. So it'll probably be another year before we, really begin to see huge benefits. But already I'm very pleased that Jason Schenkel, the director, is reporting numbers and data of increased, contacts and increased services.
I remember asking him this when I first interviewed him when he had taken on the role. Where would you want it to see be at a year from now?
The Veterans Department?
Yes.
Well, for one thing, I still think it's important that we potentially look at a different location for the Veterans Department, or that they be present more than just in Holland. And I say that because some of the initial feedback that we got both from veterans and former state rep Barb Vanderveen is the one who really brought the needs to the forefront, was just that veterans, they're not enjoying going into that building.
The
health department, because it's and nothing against the health department, but it's a government building, and they like their privacy, and they don't like feeling like they're going to get government services, even though they are, it's a veterans department. But I think they just want to be treated with dignity and have a place that's theirs. And so I'm continuing to hope that we can make a space where they feel welcome, and they it does feel like theirs. So I would like to see that a year from now, that somehow we've worked that out. And so I know they've done some work just for that space, but I still would like us to do more if possible. I think more coordination potentially with other veterans services that there's other organizations around the county who are providing services to veterans, so maybe working together a little more with them. Potentially having our own VSO officer. That was another need because
they just hired that on, right?
Yes, I think so, and so I'm not completely understanding where we're at on that.
Okay.
But long term, there was concern about multiple VSO officers servicing the veterans, and so there kind of being this constant flux of who's helping who, that kind of thing. So I would just like to see that situation stabilized.
Okay. American values. Explain to me, what are your American values, if you can?
So by American values, I would say a deep love for America. That we don't despise America, because I think there has been a tendency to throw America under the bus. So a love for America, a love for the American family, putting value in their, a mom and a dad both being present in a home when possible, and certainly that doesn't always happen, and we value all parents, but continuing to build up families, building up parents. So when I think of American values, one thing that I think is completely in the wrong direction is the over-sexualization of children, so maintaining childhood innocence, that the transgender ideology doesn't take over as the norm, that we are protecting girls in bathrooms and in sports. So to me, really, American values kind of is, Tucker Carlson puts it this way, I'm really a 1980s moderate. It's not radical, it's just not swinging to the extremes that our culture wants to go at this point in time. So maybe it's being a little bit more of a traditional, historical American.
So on that note, because I obviously have read over Ottawa Impact's website more times than not. I know the mission statement, I can't say the mission statement, but in some kind of form of statement it says you guys believe in the Judeo-Christian heritage of America. So what is that, what is the future for Ottawa County when it comes to, when you have that kind of a statement out there? And you just mentioned like mom and dad woman and father. What about people who might identify as a woman and woman who are married together?
Well, first of all, I would say that, so when we talk about Judeo-Christian values,
Okay.
we're talking about America, because America was founded on Judeo-Christian values. And so we're simply saying we believe in the roots of this nation. When you go, for instance, when we went to Washington, D.C., and we toured the monuments while we were there, it really struck me how many faith statements are in those buildings.
Faith or faith?
Faith, God.
I didn't hear. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure. I thought you said fake or faith.
Oh, yeah, faith.
Thank you.
So statements about God and how ingrained he was in the founding of our country and the faith of the founding fathers. Now, certainly I know not all of them, were Christians, but certainly just this understanding that he was just part of the core of our nation. And so we believe that that's still true here in Ottawa County and in our nation, that God is a significant presence in our nation and in our county. And there's a push to push people of faith out of the public square and to push God out of the public square. And something that has been interesting to me is that so when you push God out, it's not just that God has been pushed out, something comes in and replaces him. And that typically is secular humanism. And secular humanism has also been ruled to be a religion. And so we're not saying no religion, we're saying no Christianity, and instead let's insert secular humanism. And so there's always going to be faith in the public square, there's always going to be faith in county government, in state government, in our national government, because we as people believe in something, we all believe in something. And so, where does God and faith fit into Ottawa County? He very much does, faith very much does. But as you saw, a Satanist requested to come and pray here. And so, we believe in the Constitution. Quite frankly, God is a God of freedom. He gives people, obviously I believe in Christianity, I believe in Jesus Christ. And God gives us the freedom to choose him. I believe that he created us, but he didn't create us so that we had to choose him. He gave us the choice, he gave us the freedom to choose him. And so God really is a God of freedom. And so we value freedom. That's probably one of the reasons that we value freedom so highly. And so when we go to then say we're a constitutional county, we're going to follow the Constitution. There's freedom of religion, there's freedom of speech. We don't shut down public comment because we value freedom of speech. So with freedom of religion, sometimes it gets uncomfortable. Not everyone believes the same way, but we respect that because we believe that people are the most free when they're literally free, and so we will take the uncomfortable moments of, for instance, a Satanist who doesn't believe like us coming in and taking a moment to do the invocation. That was very difficult, it was difficult to be a part of, it was difficult for many people, but that's freedom. And so how does it work to have people who believe different things in the same county? You respect each other's freedom. I'm not going to force someone to believe the same thing that I believe. I don't want to be forced to believe the same things that others believe either. And I think that's where we get conflict. Is right now there's a real push to force everyone to believe secular humanism, to believe in this sexuality. Religion really is what it has become. And so there needs to be freedom on both sides. We don't need to be forcing each other to believe, what we personally believe.
Thank you. You talked about moving forward with the CMH. Obviously, that is something you're on the board, correct?
Right.
So how do you move forward with the CMH? What do you want to see the direction go when it comes to CMH?
So one thing that's important to me is I just think there needs to be a focus on,
I should clarify, CMH and community mental
yeah,
health,
community
sorry.
mental health. I think there's been a change in some of the services that are needed for our people. I think specifically, one thing that highlights that is the millage. So the millage was passed, the mental health millage, I don't know if it was 10 years ago, but it was a while back. And at the point that that was passed, there were specific needs in the community regarding the social recreational programming. And so it was passed primarily to meet those needs. Today, those are probably not our most critical needs in the county. And in saying that, I'm not saying that they're not important or that they're not needs that we should continue to focus on. But we have a high increase in children with autism. And so that population has greatly increased. And the intensity of the needs for those families can be really something. And so that needs to be focused on. We have some needs with residential services. That needs to be worked out. So there's just a lot of, in housing, again, just residential housing, those things are just very critical. And so when you look at, when you weigh, I don't have a place to put this person who's in critical need, the family is in critical need of help, versus can I go to a social rec program? There is, there is a weighing of what is more extreme, what's the more extreme need. And again, it doesn't mean that we don't meet the social rec needs, but we have some very significant needs that need to be focused on. So personally, I'm very pleased that we have Dr. Brashears coming back into the interim role and being considered, to come on permanently. He's very skilled in developing new resources and, helping to meet needs. So I'm encouraged that I think we're in good hands, and he'll, be able to help us develop what's needed.
So explain to me, when it comes to the mental health millage, do you want to see it keep going, continuing on, or are you looking to not have that anymore?
I'm not opposed to it keep continuing to go on, but I do want us to be really careful with how we use it. I think that if we're asking our people for a mental health millage, we need to be highly accountable and highly careful how we're using it.
How would you like to see it used?
I want Dr. Brashears to do a thorough assessment, as I believe he is. And if it needs to be steered towards, resources different than what is being steered towards, or if we need additional resources, I'm hoping to hear that. I suspect that our families who have autistic children probably have some great needs.
All right. Budget, my favorite topic
Yes.
of discussion. Where do you want to see the budget go for this year? Obviously, it is still in its very infant stages right
Yep.
now. We'll probably get it in August, probably after the primary. Where do you want to see it go?
Well, for one thing, I think I could be wrong, but I am thinking the budget process will be more stable than it was last year, because hopefully everyone now has come to realize that it's a process and not an instant approval. And so, so I guess that's one thing I'm hopeful for, is that there's a little more grace as to actually going through a process and asking questions. I particularly appreciate Commissioner Cosby's, input and insights into budget, because she's worked quite extensively with budgets in her prior positions. And so I always appreciate her feedback. And so I do like the move towards having more data and being more data driven, and not just, here's our request, put a stamp of approval on it. So I'm excited to see what they bring forward, and I'm hoping it, goes a little more smoothly this time.
Me too. Obviously, you bring up the more data, getting more data. The thing is, when you say that statement,
Yep.
I think about the Ottawa food story. Obviously, I've
Yep.
been very much covering that story. It just seemed like that was always an excuse to keep pushing it down the road. we got the data of 2023 numbers, and when it came to that Ottawa food coordinator, we had still yet to do anything. So where do you want this process to go for this Ottawa food coordinator position?
You know, that one is difficult for me, honestly, because when you look at that, you know, at one point, I think the request was for $112,000 per position.
For benefits as well.
Yes, for benefits, but also extra money thrown in for, you know, a supervisor's time, whose time was already being paid for within the budget. So why are we now, you know, upping this allocation? So, I mean, there are definite questions. But then when you looked at the benefit of, like, the literal, you know, cost, like financial benefit going out to the people, it was very minuscule in comparison to $112,000. So we're passing out maybe $12,000 worth of food at a cost of $112,000. That does not make sense.
Where'd you come up with that $12,000?
So there was the vouchers they were passing out.
The $25 senior project fresh vouchers.
Right, and
Okay.
so I believe it was one time a season, $25.
Right.
So when you did the math, it maybe came up to $8,000 to $9,000 worth of vouchers. And then there was a bag of groceries or 2 bags of groceries that went out to a certain number of migrant families. Again, that doesn't calculate to being that much money. There was moderating a Zoom call. Again, how much does that really cost to do? It just didn't add up to $112,000 to me. Meaning, what other resources do we have? It doesn't mean that, you know, maybe we still want to do the work, but it's also not statutorily required work. You know, it's work that many nonprofits in the county are doing. Again, it doesn't mean the county itself couldn't do it, but it's not a statutory requirement or responsibility of the county to do it. And so personally, I'm just not convinced $112,000, or I think maybe it went down to $80,000, you know, but still, just how else can we do this? And so actually when Administrator Anderson came on, you know, we asked him, please take a second look at this, because these figures just aren't adding up for us. And I believe that he, you know, proposed to the health department, you know, I think my staff could take this on. You know, I think we could help, you know, get those vouchers out if that's what you need. How can we help? You know, how can we do this in a different way? And so I think, you know, things like that, maybe we just need to look at, you know, if we really want to do something, is there a smarter way of doing it? So it's not that we don't value the people, but again, if this is a nonprofit area, should nonprofits be doing it? Should we be looking at a different way of doing it? One thing I'm not sure if people are aware of, but our county benefits they're phenomenal. You know, they're great benefits. They're very expensive benefits. And so there might be times when it's more a wise use of taxpayer dollars to actually contract out, you know, or pay to help a nonprofit have someone on their staff do it instead of a county employee do it.
But at this moment, we haven't done anything since that last request, I think.
I don't think so. Like I said, I know that Administrator Anderson had conversations with them about how can we do this differently, and I don't think that there was a request for help.
Okay, cool. Obviously, I want you to campaign for Anderson because obviously he's running for sheriff, but he's the interim. So explain to me, where are we in the process for finding a permanent administrator?
We're working on it.
I hope we were working on it, but like, where are we?
Yeah.
Have we started this? Have we gotten applications, resumes?
No.
Have we heard anything or created a committee to find a person? Where are we on that process?
I would say we're at the beginning of the process, but we know what the process will be, or we're beginning to identify the process. I think there is a desire to not do this right in the middle of a primary.
Okay.
For stability for candidates. We want the best pool of candidates possible for the county, and you know, with 300 to 400 hit pieces written against the board, it's been a little bit, you know, chaotic and volatile, and so we want we want candidates to know what the future might look like for the county, and we want a good pool of candidates. And so I think you'll begin to see some action on that, but we've been very careful with timing for the benefit of the county.
I explained this to Joe earlier when I was sitting down with him. When it comes times for budget, corporate counsel, I've been tracking the invoices for it. We have now hit $1 million, and like I'll clarify as I did for Joe, corporate counsel was a big chunk of that, and the rest was the Ottawa County Insurance that fights the lawsuits that are done on the county. Are you still okay with the Coleman Legal Group handling that, knowing that price tag so far?
Absolutely. I'm totally okay with it. I think that some of the past comparisons haven't also factored in the dual cost of both corporate counsel and the insurance authority. Oftentimes those comparisons are not equal at all in looking at both buckets. And also, I think we have some great advantages now. We had primarily one person. Now we have 4. We had pretty significant lack of process and oversight issues on things like contracts, and a lot of work has been done to shore up things in this county to ensure that our contracts are good and safe, and strengthened in ways that were desperately needed. And so that takes time. It will probably take, I'm guessing, less time going forward, but there was a significant amount of work in that first year to go through and really ensure our contracts were in place, which are really important for the safety and well-being of the county. And so that's been very important work that's been done. I also kind of get a kick out of the same group bringing the lawsuits and then complaining about the cost of the lawsuits, because you don't really get to create the problem and then complain about the problem, but that's what happens here. And so when you look at, and it's not the case, with every single lawsuit, but a vast majority of them have been brought by known Democrat activists, whether it's the former chair of the Michigan Democrat Party, or it's Attorney Sarah Howard, who's involved in multiple lawsuits and herself has run for Senate as a Democrat here in Ottawa County. Before we even got into office, Attorney General Nessel came into town, and they had a conversation about how do you stop Ottawa Impact, newly elected county commissioners, and she told them lawfare and recalls. What have they done? Lawfare and recalls. So once again, you can create the problem, but then the complaining about it, yes, it is their taxpayer dollars too, but they're choosing to spend their taxpayer dollars by bringing lawsuits.
I would preference the lawsuits have costs less than corporation counsel, and I will preface for my people who are watching, this was 2023 and 2024 combined. So just to clarify that for you as well. I'm glad you brought up the one attorney discussion topic, because when I was going through the invoices, I was looking at the fact, because I looked at your facts versus media pamphlet there. I checked the billable hours, and I saw Jack Lene.
Yep.
Both pretty much had done billable hours for all of 2023, with the exception of Lene, probably the first month. Probably got hired on in February, I don't know. But Stephen and David only worked 5 months each. So, are you getting 4 attorneys or are you getting 2 attorneys?
So generally so when I make the comparison, in the past we generally had one attorney who was primarily corporate counsel and the same attorney who worked for the insurance authority.
Yeah.
And so now we have primarily Jack and Lene who work in corporate counsel, and Steve and Dave who work in the insurance authority, and they're the primary attorneys who work those cases. So yes, it's 4 attorneys, 2 of them primarily fulfilling corporate counsel, two of them primarily fulfilling the insurance authority work, if that makes sense.
And you mentioned budget. I believe this year so far they've gone to 300 some odd $1,000. Obviously, we still have a few months left. If they go over budget, then what?
So that's a good question. I think a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that there's a contingency fund built into every budget. And so when you look at the audit that happened for 2023, there were no budgetary overages. And so part of that is because there is a contingency fund built into the budget. So there's some flexibility to be able, if there are extra expenses here, you're able to work with the contingency fund. And our goal always, is to not exceed that contingency fund. Obviously, to keep the budget in order. And we didn't, even with the extra, attorney's fees that happened in 2023. There were no budgetary overages. We worked within that contingency bucket, to make all the numbers come together. And, the same thing will happen this year. I don't anticipate that we're going to, go outside of that contingency fund. I'm not hearing that we will. I don't anticipate that we will. The budget's something that we keep an eye on.
I remember you mentioned, I'm sorry to backtrack to the mental health situation. You mentioned residential services. Was that more or less about the mental health, or were you just more or less trying to talk about residential homes just here in Ottawa County?
Mental health. So in mental health, so for community mental health, IDD population, there's quite a need for the residential facilities for them.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. I remember you mentioned Dana Nessel when it came into the area and mentioning about lawfare and lawsuits. You all came in here January 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
We saw the changes all of a sudden just happened. You fired John Shea, hired John Gibbs. Yeah, you tried to demote Adeline Hambley to interim. You hired on David Coleman. You put Doug Van Ness into the OCI, and then you changed the model to where you belong to wear freedom rings. How did that all come about? Day one.
Well, we made campaign promises and we kept them. That's how it came about. I don't believe that you should make campaign promises and not have the intent to keep them. So I think it was really important for us to come in and to change the course of the county, and then to continue on from there. We got very clear indication from both corporate counsel and from the prior county administrator that they were going to be completely opposed to us. And so we believed it was really important to come in and to make changes. And we knew it would be difficult. Change is hard. But, if you're going to make changes, do it. It's kind of ironic to me too, because what did we see when the House and the Senate changed in Lansing? Immediate changes, immediate action, like hard changes, hard action for Republicans to look at, and to not be able to do anything about. And that wasn't complained about. That was understandable because Democrats do what they say they're going to do, but Republicans don't. And so I think we got used to decades and decades of this county acting like a Democrat county when we're a Republican county majority. Obviously, there's people of both persuasions who live here, but I think that was part of the shock was oh my goodness, we actually have people who are going to govern this county in a conservative manner, and we have not seen that.
I think the reason, the biggest complaint I heard from a lot of people when it came time for last year when all these changes happened was the fact is it just seemed so abrupt.
Mm-hmm.
I get the idea of changing things because you're now the majority. But the thing is, you hired on John Gibbs.
Yep.
You fired John Shea for a tune of $200,000. You hired on John Gibbs. $200 some odd thousand, and then on top of that, he now got canned. That is, I guess, the concern is how did John Gibbs or David Coleman or Nathaniel Kelly, who was in the back, how did they all know to be here that day?
Well, yeah, obviously they knew to be here that day, right? So, it's because they were here.
But why were they here?
Why were they here?
Yeah.
Well, what happened that day?
Okay.
So, but the one thing I would say is, if we had one thing to do differently, it would be with John Gibbs. I 100% believe that we needed to come in that day and change the county administrator, because the prior administrator was very clear that he had no regrets about how COVID had gone, and that should it happen again, he would do the same thing. He was very clear that he viewed himself to be in charge and not the board, and that was not going to be workable. When there's changes in corporation management, they would never put up with leadership that has the intent of working against them. That's just unheard of. So why should that happen in county government? It shouldn't. You'll get nothing done. But with John Gibbs, the one thing that I would do differently, because again, we needed to come in with a different leader, and as I would have put that contract at like a 3-month provisional to ensure that the person we were putting in place was going to, be a good long-term pick. And so if I had anything to do different, I would have done that different. So, and it's something to keep in mind, going forward in the future is, we do want to make sure that, a county administrator is somebody, it's an important position. So we want to make sure it's somebody that's going to work out for the long term.
Perfect. I think I've hit every question because I've taken just as much time with you. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything that I might have missed, or anything that you would like to further discuss?
I think I would just say that I think perhaps part of the drama that has happened over the past year is partly because we had a group of very, very strong and talented parents who came in, and parents are not politicians. They're normal, everyday people, and so while politicians may have handled some things differently, everyday normal parents, are going to just use common sense and do their best that they can in weighing decisions. And, certainly, like an example of this is you probably can tell we don't particularly enjoy working with the press,
Really?
Yes, because that's not why we came into office. We didn't come into office to be in front of cameras and to be talking to reporters nonstop. And that was not anything that prior boards did. There might have been 2 articles a year because I was watching. So, and so I think that, I think a little bit of grace can and should be extended to this group of really brave parents who stepped forward to lead this county.